All right, good morning everyone. Thank you for hanging out in the nice toasty room and coming to my talk. It is quite warm in here. I'm Emily Grausgruber. I work for New York State DEC in the central office, and I am a warm water unit biologist. And today I'm going to be talking about the overview of our black bass fishing tournament permitting and results system. This is the first year of that. So I'm going to give a little overview of what I hope to cover in this talk. So I'm going to give a program overview so you can all become familiar with this permitting system, what kind of results we're collecting. I'm going to give some preliminary statewide analysis data, and then I'm going to focus a little bit on top 10 waterways to show how we're using these data to make informed management decisions. So let's talk about the program in general. And you might be wondering, why black bass? So black bass, when I refer to that, that includes largemouth bass and smallmouth bass. They are New York State's most targeted, popular sport fish. Anglers spend a lot of time and money in general just targeting these species. And in addition to that, New York State gets a lot of publicity when it comes to top bass fisheries in the country. So for example, in 2025 Bassmasters, they rank each year the top waterways across the country. New York State, we had 2 in the top 10, which is very noteworthy. And then if you look specifically in the Northeastern division rankings, New York State has 4 in the top 10. So this brings a lot of publicity. It's on ESPN. Everyone knows, like, if you want to go find bass, New York is a good spot to go looking. And with all this publicity and just popularity of the fishery, New York State DEC was getting anecdotal concerns regarding the effort. So is all this targeting, all this fishing pressure, having any population effects? Is it associated to specifically the tournaments? And this led to the development of a recent regulation. So in August 2024, the Bass Fishing Tournament Permit and Reporting System regulation was adopted. It became effective on September 9th, 2024. And this rulemaking establishes a free, totally free, permitting system where groups are targeting only black bass. So if you're targeting either or species, you need this, especially if your event has 10 or more participants. So this is a recent regulation, and right now we're doing a lot of outreach, trying to inform others about, the regulation in general and how we're using the data we collected. So if you're curious and want more details, we do have a dedicated website. I have the link up here. If you just Google New York State Black Bass Fishing Tournament, it's the first thing that pops up. This is what the page looks like. So on here we have like the definition, who needs this permit. We also have a nice link that tells you just click on it and it goes to a super easy form so you can apply for your permit. You go further down the page, there's another link. That's where you submit your post-tournament results. It's very streamlined and efficient. So this is readily available online. You might be wondering, what does a permit application look like? It's a super easy form. So we use Survey 123, and we've tested it. It takes about like 2 to 3 minutes once you know how to fill it out. And we ask for very easy information. The organization name, contact information for the tournament director, as well as location, so what water body or water bodies you'll be on, the event of your tournament, an estimated max size of boats and participants, so how large are the events supposed to be, scoring procedure, so if your event's going to be catch, measure, release, or are you going to bring these fish to a central weigh-in or scoring station at a boat launch, and then how you're going to score the fish. So is it going to be based on weight, length, just raw count? Here I have an image of the form, super simple, and like once you fill it out once, with technology, it will remember your information. So this has been well received by the tournament directors in general because it's so efficient, and it typically takes, I do all the permit reviews, 1 to 2 days to get your permit. You get an email, it's super easy. So after an event, directors are required to provide results to us. They have 45 days to do so. I'm going to talk about how long it usually takes them to get these results to us. But basically, we ask for all kinds of questions. So here I have like an example. We have a cheat sheet that directors can download. These are screenshots of this. And basically all events, we ask for your start time. When did you start fishing? When did you end fishing? How many people actually fished your event on a given day? So some events are multi-day, so we count for angler count. We ask for scores for the top 5 finishers to try to kind of regulate and make cross comparisons. So we look at the best of the best, and we look at overall scores. We ask for a total number of each species caught. We also ask for mortality of each species for the event, which is very nice. And then in addition to those generic results, so here I have an example of a weight-based tournament for a single water body. So if you're gonna bring your fish to a weigh station, we're gonna ask for a total number of bass for your top 5 finishers, the weight of all bass scored on the day of a tournament. We ask for your heaviest largemouth bass, your heaviest smallmouth bass, and then we also look at number of bass, so largemouth over 5 pounds, and then smallmouth bass over 4 pounds. And we use these data to make informed management decisions, and we also share it with the public as well as with the tournaments, because we're reliant on them submitting data. We also have a dashboard that is on the Black Bass website. And this dashboard is a really cool tool. So in here, it's up right now. You can type in a water body name or select it. So here, I've chosen Saratoga Lake. So it highlights your water body. We're kind of right over here. And it lists events. So over here, we have some examples. So it will provide information to the public as well as other tournament directors. Regional biologists look at this sometimes about who's where on what events. And this is great outreach and information to share with the public. So if you're going to a waterway and you're just like a family, you want to go have some fun, catch some bluegill, but you're not really confident, maybe you're backing up, trailering the boat, maybe you don't want to go to a water body when there's a huge 200 boat tournament occurring. So the general public rarely uses this information to make informed decisions about what resources they might want to use. We have a lot of directors that use this as well to see who has permits where, to try to avoid overlapping, or to give a hint as to whether a boat launch is already called for. So certain boat launches require additional permits to have events, and this information can help the directors kind of decide where they might want to go to have their events. So these are great resources. This is a quick overview of the program. If you have questions about fine details, I'm happy to answer them after my talk. So let's kind of talk about data, because that's the fun part. So I'm going to start with kind of a statewide analysis, some generic results. These data are up to January 22nd, 2026. So this is the data set that we're using for our first annual report. So I'm going to share some highlights. So in 2025, we received 875 permit applications. We approved 804. The remaining were either canceled due to conflicting events on water bodies, rough weather, and also permit issues with boat launches. So if they couldn't use a boat launch and they couldn't figure it out, they just canceled the permit. We did not deny anyone. As long as you follow the rules and the regulations, you got a permit. And that's how this is set up. We had permits for 84 water bodies in total, and this is great because as a state agency, we can't go out and sample every lake in New York, but we can partner with anglers to get citizen science data, and this is an amazing resource. So let's kind of briefly look at some data. Here, I'm going to compare single versus multi-water body tournaments. On the top panel, this is going to be multi-water body tournaments. On my bottom panel, this is single water body tournaments. So multiple water body, the definition is waterways that are not contiguous, not connected. So I can't drive my boat from one to the other. So a great example of a multi-water body tournament would be you can fish Seneca and Cupid Lake on the same day, at the same time, score your fish, and compare across lakes. That's totally fine. An example of a non-contiguous water body that's very common is Juanita and Lamoka lakes. If you're not familiar with them, they're connected by the canal. The fish can move from lake to lake. You treat them as one. So let's look at some data. So what we can see on the top panel, on the x-axis, I have different modes of transportation, so how the participants will be using the fishery. So on waterways, it's predominantly kayak tournaments. And this makes sense. What they'll do is they'll pick like a chain, a series of lakes, they'll go out with their kayaks, they'll do their fishing, and so forth. You can also notice my sample sizes here. So multi-water body tournaments, we learned, they're not really popular. They're not common in the state, and this is something we did not know prior to this. If we look at the bottom panel, you can see my sample size is much larger. These are our single water body tournaments, and they are predominantly motorized boats. So people using bass boats, we do have some kayak tournaments, and some tournaments where they can use either or. So they could be on the shore, they could use a paddle boat, any kind of vessel. We can also look at the data and ask questions about length versus weight tournaments. So how are anglers actually scoring these fish? So on my top panel, this is going to represent length-based tournaments. On my bottom panel, these are weight-based tournaments. My x-axes are the same. My y-axis is just number of tournaments. So if we look at the data, our length-based tournaments, they're predominantly kayaks. This kind of makes sense. It's easy to take, there's all kinds of cool apps I've learned about, but you can take pictures of fish and it'll figure out how long they are. You can take a measuring board. It makes a lot of sense that they just take their lengths and release the fish. But for our weight-based tournaments, this is commonly done in motorized boats, in bass boats in particular. So this is great, just baseline information, because prior to this regulation, we would not have had a means to go about and share with confidence what tournament participants are doing and how the events look. We can also look at how you score the fish, so length versus weight, so length at the top, weight on the bottom. But now my x-axis is, are we bringing the fish to a central scoring site? Are we going to do that catch, measure, release style tournament? And if we look at the data, we see that our length tournaments, they're typically, they catch the fish, they measure them, immediately release them. However, if we look at our weight tournaments, it is common that these fish are brought to one weigh-in location to do the scoring, like a typical kind of fishing tournament picture you might envision. We also collect data on the director's state. We use this as a proxy for where participants might be coming. Prior to the regulation, there was a lot of concern about out-of-state people coming, how many people come in to actually have these tournaments. So now we have some baseline data, and we've learned that predominantly, roughly 80% of the tournament directors, they come from New York. So predominantly we have a lot of New York-based events, and then the other most popular is Pennsylvania. We can look at when tournaments are occurring. So here on my y-axis, I have number of tournaments. On my x-axis, I have our months, and we can look at when the events typically happen. We can see that 86% of our events, they occur between June and September, so we now have an idea of when they're occurring. We can also look at this in relation to what kind of event, so if you're a kayak-only event, motorized boat, multiple watercraft or shore, and how you're scoring your fish. Are you bringing them into one location? Are you catch, measure, releasing? If we look at this, our kayak tournaments throughout the year, they're always catch, measure, release. It's very consistent. When we look at motorized boats, initially, they have to be catch, measure, release. That is the regulation, the fishing regs. They cannot bring them to a central weigh-in location, but we notice June 15th, once it hits that magic date, they want to bring the fish in to one location. And this is also mirrored in our multiple watercraft surveys as well. So this is an outline of permitting data. If we look at results for the tournaments, what we can see is that this past year, roughly 48,000 fish were scored in. That's a huge sample size with not a lot of field effort, which is great. And if you break that down, roughly 28,000 largemouth bass were scored and 19,000 smallmouth bass. So this is great information for the state as well as regional biologists to get a sense as to what's going on with our bass populations. Before, I mentioned that directors have 45 days to give a result to us. So here on my x-axis, I have number of days, This vertical line represents that 45-day mark. You're supposed to legally give us our results by then. And then we have number of tournaments on the y-axis. And what we can see is that most directors are great. It takes about 2 weeks to get results. However, some need some little like coaxing, reminders, and it can take upwards to 115 days. But in general, our reporting rate was really high. It was 92%, which is great, that we can form this partnership and have them share their data with us. We can also look at the number of participants per tournament. So on my x-axis, I have participants per tournament day. My y-axis is the number of tournaments. And what we can see that on average, tournaments are about 25 people. It ranges from 5 up to 322 individuals. These very large tournaments, this is Major League Fishing. So this is a national huge tournament. So we see that typically with the big organizations, but in general, a lot of our groups, they go out once a week on a given day, and they have about 25 people that come together to have an event. And all this information is great, but it's kind of broad and vague. It's across the state. So sometimes it's nice to look at a smaller kind of lens. So we also look at like our top waterways. Here I'm going to talk about our top 10 waterways. I have them on the x-axis. And like some of the waterways with the most approved permits for 2025 include Lake Champlain, Onondaga Lake, Oneida Lake, Cayuga, Canisius, Erie Canal, Keuka, St. Lawrence River, Honeoye, Lake Ontario. And with these data, we can get more unique results and ask very specific questions. So here's an example of looking at the average number of bass scored per angler hour. So basically on my y-axis, we use this equation. So we look at the bass scored and we account for how big the event was and how long they fished, because events can range a huge amount of time. So here on this panel, we're going to have largemouth. Over here we have smallmouth. The x-axis is kind of like gives away the actual results, but we can see that largemouth bass, high numbers are caught in Honeoye and Erie Canal and Cayuga Lake and Lake Champlain and Onondaga, whereas our smallmouth, you're going to see a lot of them in St. Lawrence River, Oneida Lake, and Lake Ontario. We can use this same equation to ask questions about big bass. So we collect data on the number of largemouth bass over 5 pounds and smallmouth bass over 4 pounds. And what we can see if we look at these data is that we have a huge range in where people are catching large bass. And we share this readily with the public to make informed decisions regarding where they might want to go fishing on their next adventure if they're targeting large fish. So to conclude, I want to kind of wrap up with how are we using these data. So these data, they're put into annual reports. It's going to be our first year for one. This will be shared online with the public as well as with the directors. We also use these data to make active management decisions. So if you look at the New York State Tackle Box app, there's going to be a spoiler alert in the future, very soon. There'll be a pool layer, and we're going to identify where the top bass fisheries are. So if you're a family, you don't know where to go, we're going to give you 20 or so great places to go and try to look for these fish. We also use this information with our regional fisheries biologists to make informed decisions about where they might want to go sampling if they're worried about the effects of tournaments. With that, I want to thank you for your attention. I have my contact information, and I'm happy to answer questions.